Hi guys! Today we are looking at 5 common mistakes which new riders often tend to make. First big mistake is buying a motorcycle which is too big and too powerful. As a new rider, I may think there are good reasons why I should start with the big bike right away. I may think that I'm already pretty good rider because I drove a car for 15 years. Or I can think that if I buy a small motorcycle, it will be boring. Or maybe all my buddies have over 1-liter monsters and I want to fit in. Or perhaps I am a tall and heavy guy and thus I just must buy a big heavy motorcycle. By the way, there is always a person in India who hauls his whole 7-people family on his 125cc Bajaj, so maybe I don't really need a huge engine after all. All those are surely can seem like valid reasons at the time, but the truth is, I met an awful lot of people who bought too heavy and too powerful bike and it just crippled their learning progress and leached all the fun and joy of motorcycling. If you don't believe me, just look at your local eBay or Craigslist. There are plenty of almost new bikes, which people bought in hope they will grow into them, but sadly they never did. It's just a trap in which new people in any craft get into, not just with motorcycles. Each new photographer thinks he must have the newest, biggest, flashiest camera if he wants to take good pictures. Each new guitar player wants to get his hands onto that awesome, expensive guitar from one of the top brands in hope to get a perfect sound. And just the same thing happens with motorcycles, with the only difference that the fancy guitar and camera less likely will put its user into a hospital. In reality, big powerful bike means you have to pay for it more, pay more for gas, for tires, for insurance. If you drop it and break something, the parts will also cost more. And speaking of dropping it, the big heavy powerful bike is much easier to drop. Just like this guy who bought his liter Gixxer and crashed it immediately. Unfortunately, it's pretty common. Can you start on a big bike? Sure, you can technically, but it will be a much steeper learning curve. Learning to ride on a liter bike is like learning to swim in the open sea in a stormy weather. It can be done, but it doesn't make much sense. Don't fall into this trap. Choose something lighter and smaller. I, for example, have a whole video about 16 beginner-friendly motorcycles. There are options for everyone, for short people, for tall people, for adventure, for sport riding, cruisers, you name it. Alright, that's all good talking. But let's just say I am a brand new rider, or even a soon-to-be one. In my mind, I'm already riding a cool, fancy, sexy machine. I just can't picture myself on some geeky tiny 200cc. I'm not gonna touch that. I need that big, cool bike ASAP. My biggest fundamental mistake, which I don't really realize as a brand new rider, is that all this motorcycling journey I'm getting into is a really long-term thing. Like, hopefully, if I start riding now, I'll be doing it 10, 12, 30 years from now, right? So really, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter if I learn to ride on something small, nimble and cheap. I can learn to ride for a year, and later down the road, if I want to swap it for anything bigger and more powerful, I actually will know what I want from my new bike. I will know how I like to ride, where I do it, how often, etc, etc. I will be able to make conscious decisions as opposed to just buying a bike because it looks cool. If I do all this as a new rider, in a year I will end up riding my favorite bike anyway, but now I will actually be able to ride it well. Second big problem a lot of new riders tend to have is their protective gear, or the lack of it, to be precise. It is very common sight, unfortunately, when people just put on their helmet and go ride. And there can be various excuses for this, like I don't need any gear, I'm riding carefully. I'm not going very fast. I'm not going to crash, etc. There are several catches here. First, on the road you don't really have to ride dangerously yourself to crash. There are a lot of people around you who will do it for you. There are plenty of people driving and texting at the same time, drunks, aggressive drivers and just plain imbeciles. So, you yourself can be a model rider, but it doesn't mean somebody can't crash into you. Second thing is you don't even have to actually crash to get hurt. As we travel at high speed, even simple debris like stones, nuts and bolts, large chunks of rubber and all another crap which is pretty common on the road can easily become a projectile which, if it hits at high speed, can easily shatter our knuckles, lacerate our face or our knees or any other exposed parts of our body. And it happens pretty often, which is why we have visors on our helmets, knuckle protection on our gloves or our knee pads. As for the "I will just never crash" argument, unfortunately, our life doesn't work this way. I think it's pretty safe to assume that vast majority of people who crashed had no intention of doing it. We always have some chance of getting into an accident, nobody is 100% safe from it. All we can do is try to lower these chances as much as we can, plus take measures to minimize the damage when we eventually go down. And despite everything, it will happen sooner or later, if again we take into account how long this motorcycle thing lasts. Even if the chances of crashing are very low for any individual ride, if let's say we ride every day for 25 years, all those tiny chances stack up higher and higher, so eventually we end up with pretty high chance of crashing at least once. And we can't really predict at which point it will happen. Will it be on second year, or on 15th, or 24th? There is no way to tell. That's why it's important to wear full gear: helmet, back protector, shoulders, elbows, knees, hips, boots and gloves. All this stuff ideally should be used at all times on the bike. And what usually happens in real life is people go down, screw up their knee or ankle, and only then go and buy knee pads or good motorcycle boots. Another thing which a lot of new riders have is the lack of training. Quite a lot of new riders go through their basic course, get a license and think that's it. They are totally ready for the road. And whatever they lack in training, they can figure out later by just riding around. However, there are a couple of issues with this approach. First of all, if we are talking about normal riding on public roads, by just riding around, we certainly will learn to ride better, but to what extent? Normally, on roads, we don't really pushing the boundaries of our abilities. We don't really usually brake as fast as we can or corner at 100%, right? If we don't do it, how can we learn it? And we need to learn it, because there sure will be situations when we want to brake as fast as we only can, or swerve around the car. That's the first problem. Second one is, as a new rider, even if I'm supposed to learn just from riding around eventually, what am I supposed to do while I'm learning? Should I just ride dangerously with no clue? I don't know. I would much rather learn to ride well as quick as I could, so I spend little time on the road not knowing how to ride well. And also, I would like to be as confident with controls of my bike as I can, because I don't want to spend all my attention on things like how much throttle should I open or how much brake should I apply to be able to not hit the ground. I would much rather spend more attention on the road itself. Which car goes where? Are there any pedestrians in front of me? What is in my mirrors? Stuff like that. The actual process of riding ideally should be more like on the background of our mind when we ride on the road. It shouldn't take too much of our brain RAM, so to speak. That's precisely why advanced riding courses exist. They force us to ride in a way we can't usually on a street, and to try the limits of our bike in a safe way. For example, with my King of the Road course, you will be able to learn how far you can lean, how fast you can brake on a straight line in a turn, how can you swerve around the car really fast. All this stuff can't really be learned just by riding around the town. And knowing your limits not only gives you more chances to get out of a sticky situation on the road, but also allows you to judge your speed and your line much better, allowing you to avoid these situations in the first place. Next thing which a new rider can suffer from is the lack of situational awareness on the road. To a degree, it can be a consequence of the previous problem. If I struggle to actually ride my bike, of course I will not be able to pay attention to things around me. I will be too busy trying to stay upright and not ride my bike into a lamppost. But that's only the part of the problem. The other part is that brand new rider often simply doesn't know what exactly can happen on the road. He may not know about blind spots in cars or trucks, for example, or that if he rides along the row of parked cars, one of them can open the door suddenly, or a dog can run into the road. Or he may not know the fact that on intersections cars often don't see the bike and tend to turn right in front of it. All this is really important to know, which is why I put quite a lot of videos on this channel where I explain the most common crash scenarios on the road and reliable means to avoid them. This road awareness, in fact, may develop by itself over time, but the key word here – over time. Probably after our beginner rider experiences a few accidents firsthand. It's much better to learn this stuff from mistakes of other people. And one more thing beginners often like to do is to neglect maintenance on their bike. And I don't talk about washing and polishing it. I mainly mean three critical areas: brakes, chain, and wheels and tires. Especially tires. You wouldn't believe how often people roll into my class. We check the tire pressure and it's way below nominal. Our tires make our bike turn, brake and accelerate. If they are worn out or have wrong pressure on them, our bike will handle poorly. Same goes for the wheels. If they are egg-shaped and have loose spokes, the bike will be all over the place no matter how good of a rider sits on top of it. Brakes also should always be in tip-top shape. We have to make sure there is enough brake pad material, our discs are not worn out or warped, our brake lines are not compromised in any way, and our brake lever works smoothly, doesn't stick anywhere and constantly develops the same braking pressure when it's applied. And even the beginner rider should also to be able to service the chain on his bike. Keeping it clean and lubed is quite important for its longevity, but what probably is even more important is keeping the right tension. If the chain is too tight, it will just wear out very quickly. Make it too sloppy, and it will whip like crazy and make the power transfer from the engine to rear wheel much worse. All this basic maintenance stuff, protective gear and basic exercises to boost your confidence on the bike I cover in a great detail in my beginner rider program, which is available on my website. If you are a new rider or you want to become one soon, definitely check this course out. And if you already know basic stuff and can ride your bike pretty well, but you want to radically improve your riding abilities and become one with your bike, subscribe to my new 2-month-long King of the Road course, which has over 40 advanced exercises and a ton of theory, which will ensure your success as a rider. And that's all I've got for you today. Ride safe and have a wonderful day. Bye!